This is Halden Prison. It's Norway's second largest prison, while also being of maximum security status. But you sure wouldn't think so by just looking at it, as it was designed to look like a village rather than a maximum security prison. This is why you find materials like cork, wood and glass instead of concrete and steel that you would typically find in a prison. And the forest that surrounds this prison actually continues inside the prison walls, which helps to create a less intimidating environment. But the most impressive thing about this prison is its effects on the prisoners who reside here. You see, since its opening in 2010, the recidivism rate in Norway has dropped significantly. And today, Norway has the lowest recidivism rate in the world, which means that Norwegian prisoners don't return to prison. So why is that, and how did Halden Prison influence that? Well, the explanation lies in the way Halden Prison is run. That is wildly different from what you see in prisons in the United States. And the root of these differences comes from the differing views on what the purpose of a prison actually is. Should it be to take revenge, punish and dehumanize those who broke the law? Or should it simply be a place of rehabilitation, where the lack of freedom is punishment enough? Well, we certainly know the United States' view on this, considering the harsh environment they have created for their prisoners and the way they treat them. And actually, Norway did the exact same thing just a few decades ago. But unlike the United States, when Norway saw that recidivism rates were extremely high and kept rising, they chose to do something about it and completely changed the way prisons worked. This was the beginning of the humane prison system that eventually led to the opening of Halden Prison. So what makes it humane? And why is this a superior method to the traditional way of dealing with inmates? Well, to understand how Norway made Halden Prison so humane, let's first see the induction process through the eyes of someone who will actually become a prisoner there. And trust me, if you've seen any movies about how the Americans do this, you will be blown away by what you're about to see. First, the new inmate will show up to the prison and hand over the papers regarding his sentence and his passport. After that, he goes through a metal detector, almost exactly like the process of going through an American airport. But unlike an airport, when the check has been completed, the person will be met by a correctional officer who will politely shake your hand and welcome you to Halden Prison. This is where the humane treatment really starts to show. And now the officer will walk alongside the new inmate to the other side of the prison where the cells are located. Notice no handcuffs are used, and instead of using dead silence, the officer speaks to the person like a human being, which is a simple but effective way to build trust and show that the officers see you as a human, not an object. Oh, and if you were wondering, yes, those are football fields for the inmates. But there are a lot more interesting facilities here at Halden. Those include a kitchen where there are knives easily accessible to the prisoners, so they can make their own food. There are also common areas with comfortable seating, a music production studio, a car workshop, as well as a graphic design studio. And you might think that this sounds more like a college campus rather than a prison. But that's exactly the idea, as rehabilitation should include education, so that when the prisoners eventually come out of prison, they will have expertise in a profession they want to pursue. It turns out that shielding someone from society for years on end, without educating them or letting them develop their skills in a field they want to pursue, they end up incapable of thriving in a society they obviously don't understand anymore, which leads them back to their old criminal ways. So Halden Prison puts a lot of focus on this aspect to make sure the inmates will have the highest chance of legally succeeding in society once their time in prison is over. But what about the cells they live in? Are they as humane as the rest of the prison? Well, you can judge for yourself. Inside the cells, you will find TVs, personal belongings such as pictures, and a private bathroom. Notice the inmates are wearing normal clothes. This is because inmates can wear their own clothes and are able to decide which clothes they want to wear at any time. Something you don't see in the United States, but is an essential part of treating the inmates like humans instead of objects. But perhaps the most unexpected thing about these cells is that the keys to the cells are held not by the guards, but the inmate that lives there, which might lead you to believe that the prisoners here at Halden Prison must have some type of mild sentence. Surely murderers wouldn't receive a key to their own cell, a television, personal bathrooms, access to football fields, and kitchen knives. Well, if you thought that, you would be wrong. There's a reason why Halden Prison is classified as maximum security. Now sure, there's no barbed wire on the perimeter wall, and the architecture is beautiful and modern, but that doesn't mean you won't find people with serious charges here. You'll find anything from murderers, rapists, child molesters to drug offenders at Halden. And yes, they all get the same humane treatment. And while some might disagree with giving a murderer humane treatment, especially if you were close to the victim, just remember one thing: these people will not be in prison forever, as the maximum sentence in Norway is 21 years. So eventually, these people will come back into society where they will end up as someone's neighbor. And Norway believes that if you treat someone like a human, they will be a human. If you treat them like an animal, they will be an animal. But while we are on the topic of animals, it would be interesting to see the prison life of someone like Anders Breivik, who killed 77 people in the 2011 attack on the Norwegian island Utøya, as there must have been some kind of exception in the way he is treated, right? Well, surprisingly, he has the same right to humane treatment as anyone else. And according to Agent France Press, Breivik's cell has 3 rooms, one for living, one for studying, and a third for physical exercise, as well as a television, a computer without internet access, and a PlayStation 3. The interesting thing is that Breivik went on a hunger strike and to court over him only receiving a PlayStation 3, which he claimed was torture and inhumane, because there was a newer and better version on the market at that time. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Someone like him will never function in society again, and it's therefore a complete waste of resources to treat him so well. And I tend to agree, but the system is in place to make sure every prisoner in Norway gets the same humane treatment, which includes people like Breivik. But if we just exclude him from the picture, this humane treatment of prisoners might be the best for society. And while it is expensive to run humane prisons like Halden at a $129,000 price tag per person per year, it's still worth it when you look at the recidivism rates. In 2018, just 11.4% of Norwegian prisoners committed a crime within 2 years of getting released, where that number is more than 3 times higher in the United States, with a recidivism rate of 36%. Now sure, the United States spends a mere $36,000 per inmate per year, but looking at the numbers, it's clear that you get what you pay for. And while it might look like in the end the 2 countries end up losing about the same amount of money on their prisoners, it's not even close to being the case. You see, the difference lies in what happens when the prisoners get released into society. Do they get a legitimate job, pay taxes, and live a peaceful life? Or do they go back into criminality where they don't pay taxes and are a danger to society? Here, Norway seems to have the advantage. And while there doesn't seem to be any data on the lifetime gain/cost of a prisoner who was treated humanely versus inhumanely, it's probably fair to say that someone who was educated whilst being imprisoned has better chances of being a net positive to society, economically at least, than someone who wasn't. And because of this, humane prison systems are seen all across Scandinavia, where similar approaches have been put in place. But there's still one thing we need to address, and that is whether or not a humane prison system incentivizes more first-time criminals, as it may be tempting to do a crime if the consequences aren't as intimidating as they once were. But data suggests otherwise, as Norway's prison population has gone down since Halden Prison's opening in 2010, from 3,600 prisoners to 3,400 in 2018. So it doesn't seem like treating prisoners with dignity, respect, and trust has any negative effects on society. Rather, the opposite is true. And this might lead to more countries implementing this prison system in the future, although it would require politicians to not be short-sighted and just dismiss the idea because of the large upfront costs, which may be the biggest preventing factor of this getting incorporated on an international scale. But I guess only time will tell. Until then, however, you should probably consider subscribing, as it's free and you can always change your mind.